Well, good evening, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this Spokes public meeting and to discuss the proposals for the Granton tram line. It is so good to see many of you here. And as you'll see from the banners, this meeting is part of the Edinburgh Festival of Cycling. My name's Emma Wildwood, and I'm here just as a member of the Resources Working Group for Spokes. Now, we always like to welcome councillors, and I know Chaz Booth is here from the Green Party for Leith. I don't know whether there's any other councillors around, but thank you for coming. We really appreciate councillors' interest in active travel, and we appreciate them taking the time to be here this evening. So thank you, Chaz. As you know, unless you're in the wrong place or at the wrong time, Edinburgh is preparing for another tram line. The February meeting of the Transport Committee of the City Council agreed to consult the public on a tram extension to Granton. And the council decided that it would look at the feasibility of two routes. Line 1A, an on-road route via Orchard Brae and Dean Bridge, and Line 1B, an off-road route along the Roseburn Path. Now, the date for the public consultation is still unknown, as far as I'm aware. So this meeting allows us to consider the options very carefully in preparation for the consultation. Spokes is holding this meeting because, as many of you will be aware, because you're long-term members, it has always supported cycling as part of an environmentally sustainable transport and access strategy. And between them, our four speakers will be considering the importance of public transport, walking, wheeling, reducing car use, reducing the climate crisis impacts of transport, and improving public health. And there may be some other subjects that come up along the way as well. Our subject has already proved controversial. And I'd like to say here that the purpose of this particular form of public discourse that we're holding today is to consider very carefully a range of information and different viewpoints. So I would ask you to listen with courtesy to our speakers. That's the first part of the meeting. And when it comes to the question and answer session in the second half of the meeting, may I remind you to keep your comments and questions short and to the point, and to keep your communication cordial and respectful. So now I would like to introduce you to our four speakers and our chair for the Q&A. And I'd like to say beforehand how grateful we are that they have taken the time to prepare insights into this particular issue. Our first speaker will be Leslie Hines. She is a North Edinburgh resident and former transport convener at the City Council. Leslie will be speaking in support for the case for the tram using Line 1B, the off-road Roseburn Path option, and not the road option. Ewan Baxter helped to set up the campaign to save the Roseburn Path, and Ewan is also a member of the Rond Cycling Club, British Cycling and Audax UK, the Long Distance Cycling Association. And Ewan is going to put the case for the tram using the road route, sorry, Ewan is here, Line 1A and not the Roseburn Path. Alex Robb, who I am hiding, which is quite an achievement, is a member of the Spokes Planning Group, and he'll examine the pros and cons of each option, particularly from a cycling perspective. And Adrian Davis is Professor of Transport and Health at Napier University, and he will consider the pros and cons of each of these options from a public health perspective. So you see what I mean about a range. After our speakers have addressed the meeting, there will be a short break, an interval with some public announcements, and then I'll hand over to Joanna Boyd to chair the Q&A. Joanna is the CEO of Planning Aid Scotland, a charity and social enterprise that supports people to engage with the planning system and shape the future of their places. It's an impartial organisation, and that's particularly why we've asked Joanna to chair this session as an impartial person with some expertise. Joanna has already practised as an English barrister and a Scottish solicitor, and was leader of Stirling Council from 2012 to 2017. And I'm pleased to say that she's here with her colleague Erin Fulton at the back there, who has more information about Planning Aid Scotland for anyone interested. I'm going to ask the speakers to speak for 12 minutes and no more in order that we get this good insights from all of them. And with that in mind, I shall stop speaking and hand directly over to Leslie. Leslie, thank you very much.
Friendly discussion, and I hope that can happen this evening. I know there's people with lots of very strong views about either of the tram routes, and hopefully we can have a discussion that will be helpful and useful. These are my personal views, but I do, as many of you will know, have a background in transport and particularly in the tram project in the past. As has been said, I've lived in North Edinburgh for 40 years, and in fact lived just in Easter Drylaw, just beside the Crew Toll. As it's been said, it's a festival cycling event, and I've been asked to advocate for Line 1B as agreed in 2006. So we haven't got a thing, so we go to the next one. So I'm going to just speak a little bit about Edinburgh. Things have moved on since 2006, when the Scottish Parliament and also the Council agreed to Line 1B. And I'm going to call it Line 1B because that's what we should be talking about tonight. All of us in Edinburgh, all of us in Scotland and Great Britain and the whole of the world have to be concerned about the climate emergencies we have in our country and our world and what we are leaving to our next generation. We all know in Edinburgh the increased congestion and associated poor air quality. Edinburgh also now has a target to reduce car kilometres in the city by 30% and deliver a net zero carbon city by 2030. Transport emissions in Scotland's largest source of greenhouse gases, counting for 36% of the total in 2018, and they've only reduced by 0.5% since 1990. Car numbers have doubled in the last 30 years, resulting in emissions, health problems, congestion, reduced mobility, and an absolutely unpleasant general environment. Okay, so 1.89 billion vehicle miles will travel on the roads of the City of Edinburgh in 2023, and that was up from 1.54 in 1994. And I think we all accept that it's got worse, more travel, more journeys in Edinburgh since after COVID. It's the fastest growing region in Scotland. We have to take that into account. It's growing 6 times the national average, and South East's fastest growing region, not just in Scotland, but one of the fastest in the UK and Europe. The future population projections show Edinburgh growing at 6.6% compared to Scotland's 1.8%. And we also have the Granton waterfront, which is the largest regeneration project in Scotland. We also have East Mid and West Lothian. All of us, if we've ever been out to any of these areas, know there's a growing population and need to improve public transport links to Edinburgh city centre without a car. And recently, an Edinburgh survey said that 89% would like to see a general improvement in public transport. So just let's look at the background before we talk about Line 1B. In 2006, agreed and approved Line 1A and Line 1B by both Scottish Parliament democratically and Edinburgh Council democratically. And I think we need to emphasise that. That was a promise for the people in North Edinburgh that Line 1B would be taken. We can go into details of why that didn't happen, but I don't have time just now. And Line 1B included active travel, cycling and walking. I want to emphasise that line 1B included active travel, cycling and walking. Trams, to my view, are the solution for capacity, boarding times, off-street speeds, reliability, and a switch from a car and typically 50% faster. We will now have examples of people, my relatives and people I know, are just want to use a car, won't use a bus, but will go on a tram and enjoy a tram and want to use a tram. There is a shift that people will go from their car into tram. And what we need in Edinburgh is integrated transport and a mass rapid transport system. That's what we need in Edinburgh. So why line 1B? And I would urge you to look at the report that went to the committee in February, because it is so stark, the reasons why line 1B and every single part of the analysis they've done, why it should support line 1B. It's an off-street tram corridor which will be quicker, more reliable, greater transport planning and city plan benefits, including maximising the potential of the Granton waterfront. Serves the Western General Hospital, Craigleith Retail Park, heavy rail interchange, new offices and a hotel at Haymarket. It minimises the impact on existing streets during construction, quicker construction, less impact on other networks such as businesses, general car traffic, buses and residents. It's all right, I won't talk about Peppa Pig if I lose this line. Okay, and I believe this project is at lower risk utilities. Anyone who went through the tram will know the issue about utilities on road. We will not have that issue and that problem on line 1B. Alignment is protected and is part of the Tram Act 2006. The whole line is protected and has been agreed. And line 1B is supported by Edinburgh Trams. And probably important for a lot of people in here that cycling and walking will be retained, and we need to make sure that cycling and walking is retained in line 1B. It provides better journey times for passengers living along the route, and crucially also gives superior journey times, reliability and avoiding traffic congestion. It's all off-road. It provides a better economic performance than Orchard Brae, expected to have lower capital costs, lower operating costs, leading to the potential for line 1B to deliver better value for money. There are two issues that are obviously challenges for line 1B, and you'll be glad I'm not going to read this because it's from the report. There is obviously a real concern regarding the greenery and the wildlife on line 1B. I don't think anyone can deny that. I don't deny it. I think it's a challenge for us. But you can see from the paragraph here, which I'm not going to read out, but it's an issue that if we agree line 1B, it's an issue that has to be dealt with and has to be engaged in terms of the greenery and the wildlife. And the second issue is the cycle challenges. And I know that discussions has gone ahead and will go along with spokes to ensure that the single track and parts of the line may be lower than track bed at bridges. The road option. I'm not going to read through all this, but this is all in the report. The Orchard Brae has negative impacts on traffic congestion, interaction with general traffic, impacts on tram journey time and reliability. Congestion has the potential to cause significant impact, including emergency services across the Western General Hospital, plus more complicated during construction period. Utilities, it's not been costed at all, and constraints along the route may necessarily land purchases. Queensferry Street has not been resolved, and the provision would have a direct impact on the current and future bus capacity at an already critical location on the network on Queensferry Road and from Fife. Princess Street is only eastbound only and would require an interchange at Princess Street. It will not provide parallel segregated cycling with an Orchard Brae option. The difficulty in providing safe cycling across Dean Bridge results in this option having a negative impact on cycling. Journey time reliability for trams would be reduced due to impact of traffic congestion and further constraints. Anyone who lives in that area will know what it's like. At the moment, the bottom of Brae Road South has just been dug up for emergency gas. We all know. I was stuck for 30 minutes in a bus waiting just outside Waitrose just last week. Imagine what it would be like. It's a complex junction at Queensferry Street, Princess Street and Lothian Road, potentially undeliverable. Huge issues already for cycling and pedestrian safety. A tram using the Orchard Brae alignment would not be able to turn right from Queensferry Street onto Shanbrook Place, and there would be no flexibility for a tram to serve the airport from Granton. So my final summary, which I think hopefully is just 10 to 12 minutes, my view is that we should have a phased delivery and have line 1B first, as that's been all agreed. We should drop the Telford Road option, and I'm happy to talk about that. The on-road, the traffic disruption, possible demolition of Crewe Road Fire Station, an expensive option, and does not have parliamentary consent. We should use the original Line 1B. We should keep the original Line 1B with Telford Drive tram stop for a few hundred metres difference where that cost is just unsustainable. We should carry out partnership working with cycling and walking organisations to deliver an active travel corridor along Line 1B option. And we should carry out a partnership working with interested organisations to deliver a green corridor on Line 1B. On the on-road option, we should spend no more time, in my view, or money on this option, as it's not a feasible one. In my view, that Line 1B is the only one and the only option that addresses both cycling, walking, and also delivering public transport links to the waterfront and to all the ways along the way, because unless we invest in public transport, our city will come to a halt, our children following us and our grandchildren following us will have the worst pollution and the worst air quality that we can have. So I would urge you to support Line 1B. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie, and thank you for leading the way and keeping to time. Over now to Ewan Baxter. Thank you, Ewan.
Thanks very much. Before I begin, I just want to say what a massive honour it is to share a platform with Leslie Hines. Leslie has done so much for the residents in North Edinburgh and has probably been in more meetings about the tram than anyone in the city, and deserves a medal for that, if nothing else. What I'm going to talk about today is three big things. Firstly, the active travel benefits of the Roseburn Path. Secondly, what it delivers as an urban green space for people in the city as a linear park. And lastly, why an on-road route for the tram makes most sense for mass transit in North Edinburgh. But before I get into all that, though, I want to step back from some of the big issues here, next slide, and really try and think about what it is we're trying to achieve here. There's a lot of emotion here, and we need to think about what Edinburgh's big strategic priorities are. I think there could be a solution that works for everyone here. What is clear to me is that we must absolutely deliver a mass transit scheme for the new neighbourhood at Granton as we grapple with Edinburgh's three strategic priorities: tackling the housing crisis, reducing inequalities, and the push towards net zero. A mass transit solution delivers significant benefits in each of these areas. But of course, we've known this for a long time, and that's why we've had this plan for 20 years to take the tram down the Roseburn Path. But things have changed in the last 20 years. We need to deliver a mass transit scheme that takes account of an increased understanding of what urban green spaces deliver to the people in this city in terms of mental health and physical health, the biodiversity crisis, and fundamentally, the increased use of the Roseburn Path since the 90s as a local park. So onto the Roseburn Path as an active travel asset we shouldn't be losing. This is most fundamentally a debate about space. Who had it, who has it now, and who should have it in the future. But we should remind ourselves, this space wasn't always ours. In the 80s, Spokes campaigned hard to build the path network, the basis for the early Spokes maps. Spokes members actually hand-built some of the connecting sections at Pilton with the backing of the Labour administration in the 80s. That ambition has now been realised. The Roseburn Path now has a key position in Edinburgh's active travel network, linking to the North Edinburgh Path network and sitting as a key connector for people in the north of the city wanting to use active travel methods to get into the city centre. More than that, though, routes like the Roseburn Path are known to be effective at getting more people cycling in Edinburgh. A March 2020 report by Sustrans highlighted the most important factor in getting more residents to cycle was the provision of more paths away from roads. Information from the Dutch Cycling Embassy actually supports this. The Roseburn Path is off-road, sheltered and flat, making it an enabling route for less experienced and less confident cyclists. It's a high-quality enabling route for active travel. So what about the future then? Next slide. The council knows it must provide space for active travel next to any proposed tram route. However, reports prepared by the council indicate that the incorporation of policy-appropriate travel provision would involve, number one, the demolition of 5 bridges, and 2, the complete removal of an existing nature habitat. It's hard to do everything. There is not enough space. There is no guarantee that cycling will win the battle for that space. Some people appear to think that the City Council have signed up to some sort of performance bond, that there will be a cycle lane next to that tram route. That is simply not the case. Removing this local park, the council risks undermining the North Edinburgh Path network as a whole and diminishing active travel connectivity in this city. But the Roseburn Path isn't just for cyclists, and losing this urban green space would be devastating for residents, wildlife, and climate change. It's an urban green space used by walkers, cyclists, bench sitters, dog walkers, runners. There is an increasing body of evidence and understanding are in the mental and physical health benefits that urban green spaces can have for people and communities. This is backed up by the findings of the 2010 Marmot Review, which highlighted access to good quality green space is key to tackling health inequalities, a key strategic priority for Edinburgh. The Roseburn Path is a biodiverse linear corridor that plays a vital and important role for nature connectivity, a key part of the Edinburgh Nature Network and Green-Blue Network. Nature connectivity is fundamental to Edinburgh being able to deliver its obligations under the Scottish Biodiversity Strategy and National Planning Framework 4. Our work on the path suggests that there are 3,500 trees at risk here, the same number as in the Edinburgh Botanic Gardens. The Roseburn Path provides significant climate adaptation and mitigation, as you can see from this slide here. It moderates the impact on the high temperatures in the city and specifically reduces flood risk. We've all seen the impact of the recent water we had in the last few months. And as Leslie says, improves our air quality, a massive thing we need to focus on in North Edinburgh. The destruction of the Roseburn Path, next slide, diminishes the sense of place for the people of North Edinburgh. It will remove a refuge from traffic, a place to learn to cycle, a place to forage, to enjoy a slower pace of life, to enjoy green space, to experience wildlife. The proposal is counterproductive in terms of nature connectivity, for health and well-being, and for climate resilience. It risks removing this incredible local park, heavily used by local people. But lastly, it's not just about what we're losing, it's about the best route for the tram. When the City of Edinburgh Council is delivering and pulling together its case, it must also consider what the best route for the tram is in line with national transport policy. Here I would refer to the Jacob Steer ESST study phase 2, quite a mouthful, report, which clearly states that the on-road option number 1 serves a greater catchment of people travelling through a more densely populated areas of the city, and secondly is better for social inclusion. Fundamentally, the on-road option takes more people on more journeys. This is also fundamentally, though, about shorter journeys in this, how shorter journeys in the city need to change. Latest data from the Department of Transport shows that private vehicle usage in Britain is increasing, while the number of cycling miles is reducing. In Edinburgh, transport emissions account for 30% of greenhouse gas emissions in the city, with more than 60% of road transport emissions coming from cars. In order to meet the city's obligations on climate targets, we need to make bold interventions now to make a serious impact on private car use. For 70 years, this city has been designed around cars, and it's time to reverse that trend. The tram should replace cars on the road and not pedestrians, cyclists, and nature in a local park. But it's not just me or our campaign that believes these things are important. National transport policy places significant importance on, number 1, the sustainable transport hierarchy, number 2, protecting our green spaces, and 3, mass transit schemes that impact more people. The Cabinet Secretary for Transport has flagged this to the City of Edinburgh Council and said any proposal must align with our national transport priorities. If we want to secure investment for the tram, the City Council must therefore put forward a more credible plan that reflects current policy on active travel, biodiversity and health inequalities. Things have changed in 20 years. The Roseburn Path is a fantastic active travel asset in green space. Trams on the Roseburn Path risk a key piece of the North Edinburgh Path network. 3,500 trees, wildlife, a nature network, a local park. Trams would be transformational for Granton, but they shouldn't replace. They should replace cars, not people using a local park. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ewan, and another great timekeeper. Over to you, Alex. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Alex. I'm from the planning group here at Spokes. Yes. Even closer. Story of my life, really. Hopefully that... trying to sabotage me now as well. Hopefully that works. So I'm part of the planning group here at Spokes, and we look at a lot of the more technical aspects of cycling in Edinburgh. We work with... Oh, how about that? Yeah. Who knew this would be so technical? You know? So we look at cycle routes, strategies, and things like the tram route, and how we can make it work as good as possible for people cycling, as well as people walking and using that public transport. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the direct impacts on cycling. We've heard a little bit about the sort of socio-economic impacts and the impacts of the actual public transport. But I want to talk just about how that might positively and negatively impact people cycling. Now, why? It's a major, major project. And no matter how you use that route, it will transform that. Not necessarily positively, but not necessarily completely negative. There's a lot of positives that might come with the tram. It gives the opportunity to improve infrastructure along the route. And we need to look at how we can best take advantage of that for everyone using the route. Now, to give a little bit of context of where, because we talk a lot about, if you want to go to the next slide, please. We talked a lot about the on-road option and the Roseburn Path option. And I want to give a little bit of context. Hopefully that works up there.
Maybe if you take it out and then put it towards the Maybe if you take it out and then hold it towards
Really classic. How about that? Hey, thank you. It's complicated stuff, I tell you. You know, they didn't teach me this at university. Where are we actually going on the tram? On the street in particular, because a lot of people aren't so familiar with that option. We'd go from Princes Street, we'd follow Queensferry Street, follow the A90, and we'd turn onto Orchard Brae. We would then go along Crew Road South to Crew Toll and join onto West Granton Access. On the Roseburn Path, we follow the existing tram route. We turn onto the Roseburn Path at the south and follow up to Clegg Reef Retail Park. We may or we may not join onto the road there to take us onto Granton. Now, if we want to go to the next slide, please. We'll talk a little bit about the on-street route first. That's Orchard Brae. Because a lot of people are concerned about this. I want to talk about a couple of the positives first. The biggest thing I know for people here is that the Roseburn Path will remain as it is. I know that's a huge deal, because a lot of people use the route. But also, one of the key things is, as Ewan mentioned, the transport hierarchy. In Edinburgh, and of course in Scotland, we support the priority of people being people walking, people cycling, people taking public transport, and then people in private cars. So by taking the tram on the street, we can take space from people in vehicles rather than people walking and cycling for their journeys. And we also have some of the potential of how significant the tram works will be to improve some of the cycling on road. Think of how we added cycle lanes to Leaf Walk, but actually doing it properly this time. Yeah, but I won't talk about that too much. But of course, there's a lot of negative impacts that come from putting tram tracks on road. And the absolute key thing is that it's inherently dangerous. We've had this month 10 years of trams in Edinburgh. And over that time, sadly, we've had countless people injured, some seriously, and even that incredibly tragic death at the West End Junction. So when you put tram tracks on road, it's inherently dangerous for people cycling next to them and for people crossing them. North of Orchard Brae, the route also gets very narrow. There's going to be a tram stop on Crew Road South, if we go that way in the tram, and there simply isn't space for a protected cycle lane, as well as the tram tracks and the tram stop. So it's going to be seriously tight. But there's also unlikely to be space at Dean Bridge. That's a really bad pinch point. There's the potential to remove private cars there, but you still have to deal with 2 tram tracks and how to cycle on that safely. Now, if you want to jump to the next slide. I will try and be brief so we can get to questions and answers. I know that's why most of you are here. The Roseburn Path. The positive impacts are that, and we've discussed this a lot with council officers and politicians, because we were really concerned, like I know a lot of you were, when those initial reports came out back in February. There will still be the ability to cycle next to the Roseburn Path. We've had that assured to us by council officers and politicians. It might not be very good, it might be constrained, but I want to reassure people that there will be the possibility to cycle next to it. An alternative route will need to be built during construction. That might take years for the construction, the closure of the path. So we're going to have an alternative route, most likely on the A90, and that has the potential to feed into the city's permanent cycle network as a way for people to commute into the city directly towards Princess Street, and that could be a really vital asset. And of course, particularly around the Orchard Brae area, there won't be on-street tram tracks, and that's a huge thing for safety on street there. But of course, the negatives are obvious. The path's going to be closed initially, perhaps for at least a year, maybe 2. It's major infrastructure, particularly if we're replacing bridges, like you had mentioned. And so we're going to need an alternative. The council promised that we're going to get an alternative, but sadly, they have a very bad track record here. I'm sure we all know about the quality sometimes of recent cycling, but people might not know, as I learned to speak again, that Constitution Street in Leith is close to cycling in parts of it. And we were promised there'd be an alternative cycle route for that, from Foot of the Walk Junction to Ocean Terminal. That was going to be an alternative for cycling on Constitution Street. Well, trams have been going for at least a year now, and they haven't started building it yet. And that's simply unacceptable going forward. So we need to work really hard to make sure that if we do follow the Roseburn Path, we're putting in really high quality alternative options for pedestrians and cyclists before we start building the path, before we even touch it with a digger. And as I mentioned, we're going to be able to put a cycle path there for people to cycle and walk, but depending on how much money the council wishes to spend at the end of the day, it might not be very good. The initial designs back in 2006 had significant pinch points for pedestrians and cyclists at all of the major bridges along the route, sometimes even less than 2 meters. So it's a really difficult thing, and we need to work really hard so that no matter what option we choose, because we will choose one of these 2 options, that we work really hard that it's as good as possible for people cycling, as well as people walking next to the tram tracks and people using the actual tram itself. Now we go to the next slide. I want to very briefly talk that we're not just talking about Granton here. This route will form part of a route to the southeast of Edinburgh and potentially beyond. So we need to work really hard, and I will go on to the consultation here. I please urge you, all of you, to respond to the consultation when it does appear. It's really important that the council knows how important it is to take cyclist safety importantly. Unfortunately, we've seen it from both tram projects so far, how the tram is the sole priority, and walking, cycling is fitted around that. And we simply can't allow that to happen again. So it's really, really important. If you want to jump to the next slide. That's just giving an overview of how we're going to the southeast, and potentially more to the west, Newbridge, Heriot-Watt, and more. So it's really important that from now and going forward, we really prioritise pedestrians and cyclists in these transport projects. And just one more to sum up. The consultation's been delayed, unfortunately. It would have been timed around this, which would have been ideal, but it'll be coming in summer, potentially early autumn. So please do keep an eye out on it, even if you're not too bothered on the route, which I know plenty of you are very bothered. Please do fill out the consultation and say just how important it is that they prioritise pedestrians and cyclists in these designs. As I lose my voice as I speak. Thank you very much, and I hope you get to the Q&A. Thank you.
Very much, Alex, and thank you again for keeping to time. And we'll go straight to Adrian. Thank you very much, Adrian.
Great. Good evening, everyone. I think I've got the last slot with the very dry stuff, which is about health impacts assessments, and that's a formal process that can go through to help decide on many areas of public policy. Just waiting for the slides to follow me. I can't do the next slide, please. Bit quiet. So there's a list of things I want to go through, and the takeaway point for you tonight from about what is health impact assessment may be the first few slides, because it does go into quite a lot of detail. But the key things we see, that I know you can't read at the back here, I'm going to hold this now so you can hear me. So the first thing about a health impact assessment and how can it help is it's a practical approach used to judge potential health effects of policies, programs or projects on populations, and particularly on vulnerable or disadvantaged populations. So we can think about the route to Granton and think about populations who probably are quite disadvantaged, who may be excluded because of conditions that they may, health conditions and other things going on in their lives. It will produce recommendations with the aim of maximising the health benefits and minimising the negative effects of any intervention. It can be applied in diverse situations. We've had lots of different health impacts across all areas of public policies, about ferries in the transport sector, major transport policy proposals across Greater London. I'll come to that on my very last slide. And it's a way also to engage with members of the public so they can be involved in the communities along the route, in this case, can be involved in the discussion about what goes on and how it's assessed. And this is taking it a lens of looking at health, public health. How does it help populations' health? And health has to be defined in a very broad sense. It's not a medical, biomedical, clinical version. It's about health and well-being in general. So help decision makers as well about choices and maybe about alternatives and improvements they might have to existing proposals that could be tweaked. Some health impact assessments have ended by proposals being changed a little bit or substantially as a result of the health impact assessment being done. And it helps decision makers make choices about including things about injury and promoting active travel as well in this case, so that's obviously very opposite. And it's based on interlinked values of democracy, equity, sustainable development, and the ethical use of evidence. So not cherry-picking evidence, which is often what happens in public policy. Now, this list here comes from the World Health Organization. It's part of the United Nations, and it's one of the most robust, reliable sources of information you can go to in the world, which is full of misinformation. So if you want to look at health impact assessment in more detail, I would encourage you to look at WHO Europe, their website. But in a sense, the key thing about health impact assessment is it has a number of steps, which I'm quickly going to go through a few of these, from screening, scoping, appraisal, recommendations, reporting, and monitoring. Next slide, please. So screening, the first thing is just to decide whether a health impact assessment would be appropriate for something like the Roseburn Path. My particular view, having done health impact assessments over a few decades, is yes, it probably would, if there's a will and a decision and a collective decision that it would be a good thing and that the health impact assessment would be listened to at the end. There's no point doing a report if no one's going to listen to it. So is the proposal likely to affect the health and well-being or health inequalities? Well, possibly, I think it probably likely is. Is there an opportunity to influence the proposal? So that's about whether people commissioning it, funding or whatever, are saying at the end of this, we will listen to the report, what it says. Is it likely to provide useful information to influence decision makers? No good having a 100-page report of detail, which actually isn't actually any new information. And are there resources to do the HIA in the first place? So that's kind of obvious. Next slide. So within the screening process, one of the things we can look at is that there's no likely significant impacts on health, so we don't need to do any more all the way through, so there could be some really significant impacts on health, and therefore we really need to take that seriously and ensure that decision makers take account of it. Next slide, please. So in scoping, there's setting out terms of reference, identifying the potential areas of impact. Well, we can think that we probably think we know what the areas of impact are. They're going to be along that corridor, along that route, but there may be other impacts that we don't actually think about. There might be what we might call counterfactuals. There may be other knock-on effects that affect a wider area, which we might not otherwise think about. And we need to think about what's the relevant evidence to collect. So in the detail, there is a list here. I'm not going to read out all of these, but it starts off with the aims of the health impact assessment, but it does include the timescale over which you're trying to predict impact. So one of the things in health is that, for example, many of us here have got cardiovascular disease. We don't necessarily know we have. That's not good news necessarily, but we all have it as it builds up over time. It's not necessarily the thing that kills us at the end of the day. It might be something else. But there are ways in which the body responds to things like physical inactivity, which does accelerate cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, etc., etc. And in a world where we are increasingly encouraged to be sedentary, anything that reduces physical activity is a bad thing because it's going to impact on health, it's going to impact on the healthcare system, longer term, people taking up bed spaces because they could have been physically active, but the world outside them does not encourage them to be physically active. So that's one of the long-term things we have to think about. So we have to think about how long ahead do we think about health impacts. This is 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Often with health impacts, it takes a long time for these things to show through, so we need to consider that. We need to think about how the report is going to be considered, how seriously it's going to be considered by whoever commissions it. So let's just say Edinburgh Trams, for sake of argument, commissions it. Are they going to take this really seriously, or are they just say, well, that's only one small thing that we have to take account of? Next slide, please. So I've mentioned about communities needing to be involved, so we'd have stakeholder workshops involving the local populations as well as wider groups, and the wider groups would involve people with the knowledge about the proposals, people with the knowledge about the policy areas. We've heard about some of that, including the national policy as well as local policy, and as well as the local community. So the idea is to engage a large group of people, a diverse range of people involved in the area geographically and in policy terms to ensure that we hear all the different voices. Next slide, please. And then one of the other big things, I suppose, about it is working out how significant the impacts might be. And they tend to go from potentially severe and irreversible negative impacts, something really big. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you put it on the Roseburn Path, and we get a massive reduction in physical activity across the population of Edinburgh as a result. Well, that could be seen as severe. I'm not saying that's happening, it's just a for instance of what we might think about. Affect a large number of people. Well, it's arguable this could affect a very large number of people for benefit or for good or for worse. Affect people who suffer from poor health already. Well, we might look at the multiple index of deprivation that we have across Scotland and look at the corridor and see which communities might gain most from an on-road tram or might gain most from a Roseburn Path tram route, and work out how does it all balance out in the end. And then we need to think about which are the options which give us the greatest overall health improvement. So that's the end result of all the stuff we're trying to do. What, in the balance of things, what works out for population health? It's not for other issues, it's for population health. So the possible recommendations might lead to do not implement the proposal. Don't do it. That's quite an interesting one, isn't it? I'm not quite sure where that would leave us. Implement the proposal, but with no changes. So that's plan B, as Leslie was talking about, 1B. Make changes to the proposal to enhance the benefits and mitigate the harm. So that's that point of trying to maximise the health benefits and minimise the negative effects. I think I'll leave the last bit because I want to go over, and not over time. So we need to think about the recommendations at the end, what we might have. We might need to focus on the most significant impacts and say, these are the things we really need to consider. Other things are also there, but the most significant impacts are X and Y. And this is based on, remember, using the best available evidence that we have to make those decisions, to come to a view on it. Focusing on, always remembering we need to be focusing on poorest groups and most disadvantaged groups and how it might benefit or disbenefit those most. Be clearly specified, be practical, be realistic, and be acceptable. It's no good at coming up with something the council or Edinburgh Trams or anyone else involved in this is not going to be able to take on board. And as I've mentioned earlier, the HIA needs to report to an authority which can take forward the recommendations, whatever they are. And then one of the last things just to say about HIAs is there's uncertainty. There's always uncertainty involved in these things. We use the best available evidence, but there are obviously gaps. So we need to make sure that we can grade the quality of certainty or uncertainty about all the findings we have in terms of how much of an improvement this might make or not. And that is kind of a judgment call we have to make at the end of it. So moving to the last, I think it's my last slide. It is. So just one example, and there are probably tens if not hundreds of HIAs around, even in the transport sector, across the last 20 plus years where HIAs are being used in public policy. They didn't start in the transport sector, but they have been used more and more. Is the one I mentioned at the start, is from the GLA, which is the Greater London Authority of old, before Transport for London took over. And it was an assessment by some academics at Imperial College where they were looking at proposals for a new transport strategy for Greater London. And so the team at Imperial looked at the policy, they dissected it, they looked at the best available evidence, and they said you need to do X, Y, and Z to change this in order to strengthen it to improve the health outcomes. And the good news about this story was that the HIA was accepted in its entirety by the Greater London Authority. The policies were changed, they were checked, and the organiser and the GLA said to Imperial College, we are accepting all your recommendations. That doesn't happen normally, I have to say, it doesn't happen normally. But it did happen in that case, and that was a really good example, and you could see for years afterwards the health impacts as the way that policy was implemented came through because the health impact assessment had been undertaken using the best available evidence, and therefore the outcomes was an improvement, I hope, we all hoped, in public health. I think that's all I'm going to say for now. I do encourage you to look at the WHO Europe website if you're at all interested in the detail of health impact assessment. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all our speakers for being so succinct and to the point. This means that we have more time for questions and answers, which is great. Before I hand over to Joanna Boyd, I just wanted to say a couple of thank yous, and we've got one announcement. So I want to thank all those people who've made this meeting possible. We're always delighted to hold it here in Augustine's, but thank you to Sam on the tech, and thank you to Kate and Mies for the teas and coffees, and to Rosie and David at the back, who are still available after the meeting to sell you stuff and to make you become a member of Spokes. Now, Brendan Hill would like to give an announcement, where are you, Brendan, about Edinburgh Festival of Cycling.
Yes, my name's Brendan Hill. I noticed there was a beer bike seized on Leith Walk a few months ago. And the police, as far as I'm aware, haven't given a reason why. But it occurred to me that if we're going to have a lot less driving in Edinburgh, we're going to have to get ready to accept a lot more big bikes, potentially really big bikes. The beer bike is the size of a car. So I've organised a meeting here at 4 o'clock on Sunday, on the last day of the cycling festival, to discuss that. And there will also be about half a dozen rather big bikes displayed here that you might like to see. So please come along. It's not in the paper catalogue for the bike festival because we missed that deadline, but it is online. It's called Beer Bike Bust.
Okay, we're just going to pause for 1 minute or two so you can gather your thoughts for your questions, and then Joanna will call us to order. And I'm also going to find somebody who can take a roving mic up into the gallery so that those of you up there have an opportunity to ask your questions as well. Oh, I see a friendly hand. Great, thank you. Okay, just a couple of minutes and then we'll resume. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I hope they get it filled up. I'm not sure that's... Check this mic's actually working. Sam, can I just check, is that working? Because it doesn't... See, oh, there, 1, 2, 1, 2, that's it, yeah. Great.
Okay, everybody, if you'd like to take your seats. I'm going to hand over to Joanna Boyd from this stage on. I will be wandering around with the roving mic. Martin will also be using the mic. We are going to try and get a diverse, as far as we can tell from looking at you, range of views, and do keep your points short, because we'd love to hear from as many of you as possible. Okay, Joanna, over to you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Emma. So yeah, just to reiterate, if we could just keep comments short and 1 point per question, and if you could just let us know who your question is directed to, that would be super. So who would like to go first? Always that. Oh, okay, no problem tonight. So could I take the lady at the back on the left-hand side with the orange jumper on, please?
Hi, my name's Jennifer. So thank you very much, Augustine, for having us here. Really good speeches, really succinct. I've got a story for you guys. So tonight I cycled from the Western General at Orchard Brae all the way along South Queens, all the way up to the Dean Bridge, and I had 3 people come out on me and nearly ran me over. I'm not joking, this happened today. I also got nearly ran over twice down there. I'm actually a very well accustomed cyclist. I've been cycling since, 4 years old. I don't own a car. But today, along that road, it gave me, because I wanted to go there to see, is it me or is it the road? I usually go down the Roseburn Path every single day to get to work, but I decided to go through the busy section for our roads. And the fact is, that place is really dangerous. And you're saying that we are going to have a cycle route along a tram that goes down the Roseburn Path that won't have a barrier. We will be forced into a tram line, so we will be travelling parallel against it as well.
Can I ask what's your question?
Sorry,
and to which member of the panel?
My question is to, is it Rob?
Alex,
sorry. I just want to know, I don't feel very, I don't feel convinced by your argument tonight. I would like it if we could get some more information about what that would look like, that cycle route and shared cycle route and walking path, because you're already saying it's not, we just don't have anything. It sounds really washy. Sorry. It's very nervous doing this.
Thank you.
Your question.
Oh, I have a bad track record of microphones, so give me a minute. Very good. There we go. It's a good question, and I think it's a very good point to raise, because the details are fairly vague. The details we have from council officers and politicians is that for most of the route, there'll be a 3-metre wide tarmac path with a small barrier or fence to the tram tracks. That's roughly about the minimum that's comfortable for walking and cycling together. But a lot of the issues will come at the bridges, the viaducts, where it's going to be a pinch point. It might be down to nearly 2 metres. So there'll be the option to cycle there, but depending on how much money at the end of the day the council is willing to spend on replacing bridges and widening out the path, which obviously, as you had mentioned, has an impact on biodiversity, wildlife along the route, it's not going to be optimum, but there will be a safe route there. It's just the issue of how comfortable that is. But there will be a barrier to the trams, so you won't be able to sort of cycle into the tram or directly next to it. And it will be around the 3-metre mark for most of the path. If that helps, give some extra context.
Okay, thank you, Alex. The lady here at the front in the white jumper.
This is going to keep me fit.
Hello, thank you so much, everyone. And this is probably kind of continuing on that theme. What formal written assurances do you have from the council that there will be a high-quality cycling path? The only thing that has come out formally from the council that I've seen is the report which Leslie mentioned, which says that cycling will be discouraged. Everything else maybe is just conversation. So is there anything really formal that we can say there absolutely will be barriers and it will be, 3 meters? And I guess connected to that, if you believe that cycling will be retained on the Roseburn Path, why are trams considered inherently dangerous on the roads but wouldn't be considered dangerous alongside cyclists on the path?
Thank you.
Sure. Just to start on the first part, and it's difficult to prove a negative in that if the guarantee is there. The information comes from that report you mentioned, the discouraging of cycling, but not the banning of cycling. And just from conversations that we have with officers who are involved in the actual design and some of the actual details of the tram route and the extension, as well as the convener of the Transport Environment Committee, Scott Arthur, and other politicians. So I can't say there's concrete things because we won't know that until we go further and we have that consultation, we have the report. But from everything that I've been told, I understand that there will still be the ability to cycle there. It just won't be necessarily high quality, which is the thing. And
off the record conversations, and there's nothing formally said by the council.
Formally is that there'll be cycling ability there, but it'll be discouraged. So it's possible, but not the ideal route for the council. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Would anyone else like to come in on that point? Leslie?
Yeah, my understanding is that, I know that line 1B original did have cycling and walking, and that was a 3-metre path. And obviously that is the issue. Sorry if I've got my teacher's voice. Oh, right, okay. And as I understand it, there are pinch points, and there is discussion about whether there could be single tracks, there could be other put in place that would make it so that we could have a wider pass than the 3-metre, because I think the 4-metre now is it's a standard, whereas 3-metre was a number of years ago. And I have to say that I think the officials putting in cycling, I can say this, I'm not a councillor anymore, cycling will be discouraged, I think was the most appalling thing to put in it. Because I think it just got everyone uptight. I don't know, and if you speak to officers, it was just, we didn't think it would be. And I think we need, and councillors who are now there, need to say to the officers, because it's the councillors that make the decision, in theory, rather than officers, they should be told that we need a safe cycling, walking. And while we talk about cycling, it's also walking. I use the pass. I've used the pass for 40 odd years, used it more during COVID than any other time. And I personally think it might improve it in terms of safety. I wouldn't go there at night. I wouldn't go in there later on, in safety, and also better lighting, etc. and that as well. So I think it's about the councillors saying to the officers, this has to be, whether you're going to put a tram on line 1B, it has to have cycling and walking provision, and it has to be good quality, because that is what we want, and that has to be said. And I will give an example. It's about how you consult people, how you listen. You're never going to satisfy everyone. It's a bit like people talk about the Leith Walk cycling route off-road. That suited everybody. But, if you've got to have, the shops getting deliveries, well, you have to have delivery points, etc. So it's a really difficult in transport, as I know, I've got the scars, to actually satisfy everyone. But we need to listen. And if we do take the west-east cycling link, that took hours upon hours of my time and other councillors' time. We actually got all party political support for that at the end of the day. Now, not everybody was happy, but a majority were. The cycling groups were happy, the walking, etc., and there was improvements happened there. So it can be done if councillors are willing and officers are willing to listen and to actually act on that. So I think it can happen, and I just think we need to make sure that we do listen. And we not like everything we hear, but I think there is a solution to have cycling and walking, line 1B for the tram for everyone.
Thank you, Leslie. Another question, please. Can I take the gentleman on the left here with the T-shirt, sort of halfway down?
Thank you. I feel like I've been a bit a bit out of the loop on this, a bit naive, because I only found out recently that after cycling along the Roseburn Path almost every day for several years, came across the campaign, then realised that the tram route has already been approved, the idea of that. So I just wanted to sort of step back a bit and say, what's the actual justification for a tram route at all over other forms of transport improvement? And I've heard a few mentions of mass transit systems, and that's been used as a synonym for trams. And I think, well, buses are also mass transit systems. Why can't we have a far more efficient bus routes or bus service and much better road surface, better road quality of surface for cyclists? Because the potholes and the dangerous points are absolutely dire. So my question, very briefly, is why is the tram extension actually accepted as an exclusion? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll pass this one over to Ewan, first of all.
Sorry. So I think I've been clear that North Edinburgh does need a mass transit solution. If we're going to unlock the investment in Granton, if we're going to reduce inequalities in North Edinburgh and deliver on the climate crisis, we absolutely need a mass transit solution. I think the point on what that mass transit solution should be, is an interesting one. I personally would like to see the trams extended. I think spokes are raising some pretty significant questions about tram lines. I suppose it's over to them or other people to talk about that. I mean, personally, I think we really, to deliver in Edinburgh for the future, we need to have mass transit in North Edinburgh.
Okay, thank you. Can I bring you in?
Do you want,
Sorry, you want to come in, Leslie?
Yes, there will be people who do not want trams at all. But I think it's been proven, particularly with the New Haven link, if anyone's been on the tram there, it doesn't satisfy everyone in this community. But the number of people who are now using the trams at New Haven is massive, and there's people using them. And I think, as I said, the solution is about the capacity, how many people a tram can take compared to a bus. It's also about the boarding times, on and off. It's about the street speeds. It's about reliability, that you can get reliability. Because if you ask anyone about public transport, reliability is the issue that always comes top of the list for them. That there's going to be, it's going to come along at the time that you want. And it also means that it's 50% faster and also switch from car. There's no doubt about it. There are people who will never go on a bus, but will go on a tram and come out of their car. And you only have to look at, I think Lothian Buses is the best bus service, and it's fantastic that councillors made a decision to keep it in public ownership, owned by all of us. So that's a great thing for us, and I think Lothian Buses is great. But what we need is more working together between Lothian Buses and the trams, so the future mass transport will not be a competition between buses and trams. It'll be about integration. It'll be about all working together to actually, so you can move around. But trams are definitely a solution. You only have to go to European cities. The solution goes, they take far more people, they're more reliable, and it's not a competition. It's about a choice for people and ensuring our population is increasing. And we need to have better public transport to encourage more people to use public transport. We need to get people out, not out of their cars, but not having many car journeys. And that's what we need. So, I know there are people in here who will just not want trams, and that's fine if that's your view. That's your view. But my belief is we need investment in public transport, and that has to be an expansion of our tram plan. I just wanted to say, and I'm fit to you and Bo, but it would be useful if you actually said why the roads. He didn't actually say the road option, which is the Orchard Brae one, why we should go for that, or is he saying that we shouldn't go for that and we should look at another road option? Because I think you said you wanted trams. I know I'm not supposed to ask questions, but I may as well take the opportunity since I've got the mic.
Okay.
So, I just think the idea tonight was to discuss both options, and I don't think we really have expanded all of the options here tonight.
Okay. Yeah.
So what is the question, Leslie?
Well, hang on a minute. No, we're not going to have the panel
Well,
start asking questions of the audience, because I think there's a lot more people in the audience that want to ask questions. Gentleman here at the front. Yes.
I wonder if Leslie and Ewan could tell me how robust the cost comparisons are between the two options. Leslie has suggested that the cost of the on-road option is jacked up by the need to deal with the utilities, whereas Ewan has suggested that one of the cost issues of the Roseburn Path would be the probability of need to rebuild bridges. So, how robust are the cost comparisons that real engineers have actually done?
Okay, thank you for that question. So we're looking then at costs of both the on-road and off-road options. Ewan?
Yeah, so the reality is cost is not a factor in being able to compare either option. I am a numbers person. When I got into this, I asked for the council for three things: the budget for each route, the revenue case for each route, and linked to the number of passengers. The way that transport planning is done is you come up with the benefits first, and then you work out the costs later on. So the answer to that is, unfortunately, not a single budget or detailed engineering report has been done on either route, but the Jacob Steer report, which I've got here if anyone wants to read it, did highlight that the putting in a policy appropriate cycling provision would involve the demolition of 5 bridges. You can find out what they are in this report, and that clearly would come at a significant cost.
Thank you, Ewan. And Leslie?
The cost was taken in 2006, so the Line 1A and Line 1B was costed together, and I don't want to go back onto all of that again, but a disaster in terms of cost and delay. And line 1A and line 1B was all costed into one project. And line 1B was taken out by the previous administration, who was in charge of it at that time, and line 1B was taken out. So it's all been costed at that time, and obviously costs have risen since then. But all of that was taken. It was a business case. All of that work was done in 2006 in terms of all the details, etc. As I understand it, there is no work being done on the Orchard Brae option. We haven't even looked at whether the trams can go over the Dean Bridge, whether it's structurally sound, etc. None of that has been done. That's why I think it's a waste of money to spend any more time looking at that option, because it's not an option in the cost. I know utilities, Leith Walk, Shandwick Place, where you dig up the utilities, you find things that you never knew were going to be there and encourage. Utilities on all the road. Crew Road South, which I go up and down all the time, it's been dug up how many times? All the utilities there. That will be massive and disruptive. But as I understand it, we do not have any costs or any idea what the Orchard Brae option will be.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take a question from the balcony now. The lady in the corner in the blue, please.
That's great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Leslie, please could you be more specific in describing how residents, particularly from North Edinburgh, would use the tram if it was along Route 1B, i.e. when and for what purposes would this route benefit a typical North Edinburgh resident?
How do you benefit? Yeah.
I don't know if I'm a typical North Edinburgh resident, but I have lived there for over 40 years and brought my children up there. The route that I would be talking about, line 1B, would go to Craigleith, we'd go to the airport, we'd go to Princess Street, we'd be able to go right down all of that link. It would also go to the Craigleith Shopping Centre, it would also stop at the Western General Hospital, and also it would go to Easter and Wester Drylaw. Some people were talking about health impacts, and some of the parts of Easter and Wester Drylaw, and particularly Wester Drylaw, have got poverty and low car ownership. And the option to take it off up Telford Road would take it away from those people. So I think the line 1B would be for local people, but also for other people who would link in for jobs in the waterfront. The waterfront is crucial as the largest regeneration project. So those are all the people would be an advantage to have a tram, a fast transit link to the airport, down to New Haven, into the city centre, into all the parts along there.
Okay, thank you. One other person from the balcony, please. We'll just stay up there while we're up there. Okay, you, sir. We're having trouble passing the mic now.
I just had a question about if there's going to be a wildlife survey done to assess the real biodiversity impact. My background is in wildlife ecology and conservation, and obviously none of the animals on the Roseburn Path can be here to speak about their preference. So I think I would just be curious, either if Leslie or Ewan or anyone knows, if there would be some numbers be able to be pulled in addition to the 3,500 trees that are estimated to be cut down. I think getting that estimation is very important. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a really good point. Adrian, do you want to come in on this? Bring Adrian in on this question.
So, as Ewan, I think, said earlier, what we do know, and including some research that's done by Catherine Ward-Thompson here at Edinburgh University, amongst many others, that the human interaction with biodiversity is really important for human health. So we know a few minutes in green or blue space will actually reduce your blood pressure. So this is really important stuff, which is we're hardwired for in our DNA. We were Homo sapiens on the savannas or whatever of Africa originally, and interacting in a way that we've sort of forgotten about in modern life. But when we are in green space, it has enormous benefits for ourselves, and we're still learning about some of those. But we do have quantified evidence over the last 30 years of the importance of green space for mental health and well-being, and for physiological changes to the body which are positive. So we have to really take those into account. And if you remember what I said earlier, think about this in the longer term, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, people being able to use a facility where they have green space, whether it's on the path or in a park or be along the coastline, whatever, those things have a longer term impact on people's health and well-being and their longevity of life, how many years they might live without sickness, as well as how many years they actually live. So it's important.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you. I'll take someone from this side, the gentleman here in the blue jumper.
Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.
This is perhaps more a comment than a question, but I'd put in a plea for joined-up thinking. If the council are going to discourage cycling along the Roseburn Path, what on earth is the millions being spent on the link from Roseburn to the canal? What benefit is that?
Do you want to come in on this, Ewan? I'll bring Ewan in here on this, just to respond to that comment.
Yes, so the council are spending 12.5 million linking the Roseburn Path to the Union Canal. That's and one of the key benefits of that is it clearly links to the North Edinburgh Path network. And yeah, it sort of puts spend like that in the picture and questions why we're doing it. If I can just come on briefly on the point about access to green space, because it's sort of connected with that issue. You know, access to green space is so important, and you know, when I got involved with this, I did it because I cycle on that path. But when I speak to the residents of Drylaw and Telford, they use it as a local park. You know, we're taking a local park away from people here, and I think we've got to ask ourselves the question, when it comes to the benefits just highlighted by Adrian with access to green space, there's a social inclusion issue here. If we said to the people in South Morningside, we're going to put a tram through Braidburn Valley, do you think they would be able to do it? I think we should ask ourselves the question is why the answer to that is no.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Ewan. I'll take the gentleman in the middle there with the leaflet in his hand. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is for Leslie. You mentioned, Leslie, that in February the Planning Committee had decided not to go ahead with option 1A. Effectively, we're only being presented with one option, 1B. And so why, as option 1B is so unpopular, why doesn't the Planning Committee look at other options? There must be other solutions to this particular problem of getting from Granton up to the Gyle or up to Murrayfield.
Okay, thank you, sir. So maybe we can bring in the question of the consultation now, Leslie, if you want to respond to that.
Sorry, maybe to explain, line 1A is the one that's now been delivered, so which is the one from the airport down to Newhaven. So that was line 1A. And line 1B was the one which took you from Roseburn right down. So that was the original proposal. So the proposal for line 1A and line 1B was together. Sorry, maybe I'm...
When I refer to 1A, I'm referring to the Dean Bridge option, which we've been presented to tonight. And 1B is the Roseburn option. Okay.
Well, the line 1A, as we call it, was the one. Line 1A was from the airport all the way down to Newhaven, and line 1B was the one from Roseburn down to Granton. So that was the line 1A, line 1B. The other option regarding on-road was from Queensferry Street down Orchard Brae, up Crewe Road South, and then linking into the Crewe Toll. And that's called, as I understand it, is called the Orchard Brae, or the option. That's the option, and that's the option the officials have come up with. So there's line 1B, which is the one from Roseburn right the way down to Granton, and that line... it's not, maybe it's better if it kind of went line 1C, I don't know. But that option has just come up recently. That option's never been considered in the past. It's only just come up recently. And as far as I'm aware, there's no other option on the table.
Okay, I'm going to bring Alex in here as well, just to provide some clarity around that.
I think there might just be a little bit of confusion. So at the Transport and Environment Committee, officers wanted the Roseburn Path to be the preferred option, but councillors voted for there to be no preferred option, and for both options in the consultation to be treated equally. So both options will still be there and valid in the consultation.
Thank you. Thanks, Alex. I'll take the lady with the sunglasses on her head. Thank you. Or glasses. I'm not sure.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm not a cyclist, but I love walking around Edinburgh. I'm also a psychotherapist. And what I see when I walk along Roseburn Path is couples walking side by side, talking to each other. I see people, complete strangers, stopping to say hello, to pet each other's dogs. I see families, I see little kids learning to ride bikes in that safe space, the cyclists of the future. And I'm just wondering whether these human experiences will be put across in what seems like a package of, psychological impacts. So the very humanness, breathing in the smells of the plants, listening to birdsong. This is what we're going to lose, and we're going to lose it forever.
Okay, thank you. And can I ask who it is?
Like that question to be directed to.
I don't remember everyone's names.
And translate into a question. I think it's a very good question because it's about impact on.
Yes, yes. So I think possibly to Adrian, how is this going to be translated? I mean, when you first kind of presented your talk, you said, "Oh, I'm afraid I've got the dry stuff." This isn't the dry stuff.
So the simple answer is I don't know. My plea, which might be my end plea at the end of this debate or discussion, is that we do consider health and well-being in the round in a much bigger way than often is the case. Often health is an also-run. It's one of those things when we look back in public policy over the last 50, 70 years post-war, that it's not really being considered. And certainly, I keep trying to stress long-term health and well-being. So the points you made, I think, are extremely valid. Some of the issues are about, in science, how we quantify those. Do we make, the system we have wants us to put pound signs against those sorts of things. That's often really hard to do. But we know, as thinking human beings, that those things have effects. The child able to do something, the people able to hear the bird song, the time to stop and stare, and all that sort of stuff is hard to quantify, but it's real and it has a value to our lives in terms of health and well-being. So I think I can only say I absolutely agree those things are really important and they should be included in what I would call a population health approach to looking at this question.
Thank you, Adrian. We're going to go back up to the balcony now, to the gentleman with the glasses in the middle there.
Thanks, driver. Thanks, driver. Beep, beep. It's a ritual I really love, like getting on and off the bus in Edinburgh, but like with that little 10 seconds of time that I've wasted of all of your time, it is a reminder that it's really slow getting on and off buses. And that's one of the reasons why it's a ritual I do every day going from my home in Roseburn, but it's one of the reasons with the growing population in Edinburgh, I think it's really, really important we get trams and we can move more people around the city more efficiently. The question that follows from that for me is which route gets the biggest ridership is a really persuasive argument to me, and it's one that I've heard both Leslie and Ewan say that they think their route gives the highest ridership. What I'd find really useful is for the two of you to figure out between you what are the different assumptions that mean that you've come to different conclusions about why your route gives a higher ridership.
Okay, thank you. A good, interesting question. Go to Leslie first.
Well, I suggest if you look in the report, which went to the committee, which has been said already, the recommendation was line 1A from the officials, and every single box, which then takes on all of the issues in terms of reliability, congestion, time. They reckon that it would be at least 15 minutes in this report, 15 minutes longer on a tram going to Orchard Brae than it would be to Roseburn. It'd be more efficient, it wouldn't get stuck in traffic, etc. So it's very clear if you look in the report that it says that there would be more people would use the tram on the line 1B than they would on the Orchard Brae, because they wouldn't get stuck in traffic, it would be more regular, and there wouldn't be the congestion, and therefore it would be time. And it's reliability. I hate to repeat that, but any survey that has been done is reliability, that people know there's going to be one, that when they go, they're going to get there when they think they're going to go. So it's very clear in the report, and you can read it. The report is very, very clear that line 1A is the best in terms of transport numbers and reliability for people using it.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. And Ewan.
So the Jacob Steer report that was prepared for the council makes it very, very, very clear that the Orchard Brae route serves a better catchment, serves more people, and it scores it appropriately. The big thing I would say is, in addition to that, is it serves the key trip generator of the Western General better. It goes to the front door of the Western. The other route, the Roseburn route, doesn't go to the front door of the Western, goes to the back door, and actually Leslie's route even goes even further away. So it's actually an 8 to 9 minute walk through the back of the Western from that point. So basically, the the Orchard Brae serves a better catchment. What I would say is if you want the tram, you know, the proposal down the Roseburn Path doesn't comply with the transport hierarchy, doesn't comply with the planning guidance on biodiversity and green space strategy, and doesn't serve the best catchment. All those three things give the Scottish Government an easy ability to say no and fund something else in Scotland, like dualling the A9 or a transit project in Aberdeen or whatever. If you want the trams, you want Edinburgh City Council to give the best and most credible proposal to the Scottish Government, and that's the road route.
Thank you, Ewan. And I'm going to bring Alex in here as well, just to give a short comment.
Just one little thing in case anyone's confused why what both of them has just said can be true. The on-road tram network, the tram route on Orchard Brae, has a higher catchment. There's more houses and similar around it. But because of the journey, the connections at Haymarket and the ability to go towards the airport on the Roseburn Path, it's predicted to have a slightly higher ridership. So both of them are correct in what they're saying. Which isn't very helpful.
There we are. Okay, can I take the gentleman here in the green jumper, please?
I'd like to pose the question to spokes, and I'd like to know why you say trams are fundamentally dangerous for cyclists. Have you looked at why Edinburgh and Croydon are the two outliers in the whole of Europe? There are cities across Europe with far higher cycling levels with extensive tram networks which don't have the same level of accidents. Why is it Edinburgh is so dangerous?
Alex?
That's a good question. And I'm not saying that trams themselves are dangerous, but that if you have a comparison between cycling off-road with no interaction with tram tracks and needing to cross and cycle directly next to tram tracks with no protection, you have a far greater level of danger there. Obviously, we face significantly more danger in our design choices, as we've seen from the remedial works we've needed from both the original tram project and still be needed on the New Haven extension. Design is the key thing there. But when you have cycling directly next to the tram tracks, there is a greater level of danger there.
Thank you, Alex. Now we're going to go back up to the balcony. I think there was someone who had their hand up there, the gentleman there in the black T-shirt.
Hello. First, I'd like to make a comment about narrowness of the paths. I'd like to point out there's places like the Canal Towpath and the back of Ninja Warrior, which has a bridge pinch point. So there's plenty of precedents at the moment for very narrow cycle paths where people cope. So I regard having 3 meters width as like having a motorway to go down. The second thing is, another point I'd like to make, I'm kind of incredulous and extremely concerned that all this is based around something that happened, the analysis and all the planning is based around something that happened 18 years ago. The world is extremely different now to then. Technologies have changed. Some building materials are radically different in costs to what they were then. So I would argue that the paper that was produced then, which on how 1B was going to run, is probably not worth the paper it's written on now. And the question I actually have is, if you're actually concerned, taking a step back, if you're actually concerned about trying to alleviate the amount of pollution that's in Edinburgh from cars and traffics and stuff, Granton isn't going to be finished for a further few years. Then there's going to be a long delay while the tram path is built, so the people in Granton are going to have to struggle to get out anyway, and will get used to whatever transport facilities are there. If I had £2.5 billion to spend on a tram line, I would build it down Queensferry Road and get rid of all the traffic that's coming in from Fife.
So what is... Can I ask, was there a question in there? And if there was a question,
so
who is it directed to, please?
Why are the councils so fixated on this particular route and not taking a step back and going, where would be the best place to build a tram now?
Okay, so there's no one here... Yeah, no one here from the council, but I wonder if any of the panel want to make a comment. Ewan?
Yeah, fundamentally things have changed in 20 years. I think probably the least said about the costings that were done on the 2006 route, the better, probably, Leslie, right? You know, Yeah, and then so I think that's a point. I think the other point is, even just look at recent developments in terms of electric bikes that people are using. It's massively increasing the usage of the path. That has to be brought in here as well. So yeah, for me, the council needs to step back, and that's why I encourage them to do what I tried to do at the start of my presentation. What are the objectives that we're trying to get to here, and what is it we need to deliver for North Edinburgh, and try and reassess how we unlock that investment, and don't fixate on something that was planned in 2006 with bad costings.
Okay, thank you. Leslie?
Could I just say that I was in the opposition when they absolutely, so nothing to do with me.
Nothing to see here.
People here will know that as well. I had to take it over when it was the revised budget and the revised timetable. Press a little button and we delivered it on the revised budget and the revised timetable. To say there's nothing down in Granton, there is the Edinburgh College is now there. Scottish Gas is now there. You've also got thousands of houses being built. They're built there already, hundreds, thousands planned all the way along the Granton. You've also got a whole of community of North Edinburgh who at that time, when I was the council, were promised that this line B, 1B would come down so the traffic and the congestion wouldn't happen in their streets and in their roads. And therefore that was one of the commitments that was given at that time. And that's the reason why people feel let down in terms of that wasn't done at the time. You also have a number of organisations. You have an event space that's £16 million been spent on, an event space that's built down there, the gasometer. You also have the National Galleries now got permission, and they're about to start down there. You have got all of that development down there, and you've got a community who want to be linked into there and want to ensure the promise they were given all those years ago is delivered. That's what they're looking for.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. I'm going to take the gentleman at the front here.
So I regularly cycle on the Edinburgh Cycle Path, which has been, the canal path, which has been noted as quite narrow, and an ability to achieve cycling and walking. I regularly cycle along the Roseburn Path, and I've been frightened that we're going to lose access to cycling, which one group has been suggesting. But I also cycle regularly from Morningside down to Ferry Road over the bridge, over the Dean Bridge. And I'm absolutely terrified of the idea of having to share that with the tram tracks. So I'm actually very glad to hear that it is engineering practicable to have coexistence of tram and cycle and walking path along the Roseburn Path. That's been a revelation for me tonight, and I'm unclear why we cannot, from this body of this meeting, ask that the engineering solution be developed so that there is safe alignment of both options of sustainable transport.
Okay.
So my question is it not possible for citizens to ask for an alignment of the both? Some mention about how you might have to widen the arches of the bridges on the Roseburn Path to permit a reasonable walking and cycling alongside the tram. They can be grade separated and so on. So that's a question.
Alex, do you want to come in on this one?
Absolutely. And I think you will have the chance. There'll be a consultation on both of the routes coming hopefully sometime in summer. I would urge you and absolutely everyone here to say that if the tram does go down the Roseburn route, it needs to be designed as well as possible for cycling, to be as wide as possible, so that we can cater not just for people cycling and walking today, but for the many, many more people we want to walk and cycle in the future. So,
okay,
please.
Great. So we've got about half an hour left to go, so I want to get through as many questions as possible. This lady in the blue t-shirt here, please.
As a cyclist, and quite a slow cyclist because of health conditions, I feel having the space within greenery is really important, especially because so much greenery has been removed and so much has been built up and greenery isn't the priority anymore, which is why having the greenery and the plants along the Roseburn Path is really important. One of the other points that hasn't come up at all is climate change predictions have put that the water is, the seas are going to rise inevitably, which means Granton in 20, 30 years could be that sort of area, as predictions have been, be underwater. And my point is partly for planning. Why are there continuously more planning permissions put in place in areas that in 30 years or something aren't going to be flooded, basically?
Mm. Yeah. Does anyone want to come in on that? Yeah, Ewan?
Yeah, I would say, we need to be creating more of these green spaces, not taking them away. 100% agree.
Yep. Okay. And sorry, Leslie, you come in.
I was just going to say, absolutely, green spaces are absolutely to be protected and to be enhanced. I used to be, when I was a convener with parks, investment in Saughton Park, for example. We in Edinburgh have the highest number of your green flags in parks, improvements. So absolutely, parks and green spaces are essential. I used to also be the chair at NHS Health Scotland, so I'm well aware of the whole issue about well-being and about mental health, and particularly following COVID, and about ensuring that happens. So I agree with you that. But also there is an issue in terms of flooding, not just about planning permission. I agree with you on that, absolutely. And you wonder why they continue to give planning applications approval into areas where they know are going to be flooded is important. But there's also the cleaning of the drains. There's also, basically, if you only go along any street, the majority of the front streets are all paved over for cars, and therefore the rain can't get things. So there is mechanisms that we can do to improve the situation in terms of flooding in our city, which has been pretty bad over particularly the rain we've had. So I agree with you. There is a plan, but whether it can be delivered is another thing.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask that you keep your comments quite short? Okay, let's get to the question as quick as we can, because there's still a lot of people with their hands up. The lady at the back there in the black jumper.
I'm slightly worried about some disingenuous comments that have been made. The officer who's in charge of the transport, the trams, Hannah Ross, has said that there will be no path. It's not safe. To go on the Roseburn Path, the trams have to go fast enough to beat the time it takes for a bus to do the journey, which means they'll be going at 50 miles an hour. 50 miles an hour is where that poor gentleman was killed on the way out of town. So I don't want to cycle along a route which has no trees, no vegetation, and trams whistling by at 50 miles an hour. That is really dangerous to me. I've tried the alternative, which is to cycle up Orchard Brae, which I think is about as steep as the Mount. And as I get older, that's getting less accessible to me. So my question to the panel is, have any of you cycled up Orchard Brae, and did you like it?
Thank you. A very short question. It's really a yes or no answer. Ewan, I'll start with you.
Guilty, I have cycled up Orchard Brae.
Sure. And did you like it?
I did like it. The Roseburn Path is traffic-free, segregated, and away from cars, and it's accessible for so many more cyclists.
Thank you. Adrian, have you cycled that?
Yes, I have, and it's not the greatest experience of my life. So, I would prefer, just on the basis of to be on a space which doesn't have cars, in close proximity, and that is a human condition thing.
Okay, Alex, I'm assuming you have.
I won't tell you about my heart rate after it, but I have done it, and it's not necessarily very pleasant.
Yeah, and I think these are all points, aren't they, for the consultation? Yeah. Great. Do you want to, Leslie?
think I would even try it. I have gone along Roseburn Path on a cycle. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, I've had my hip replaced just recently in January, both hips. So I struggled a bit before I got the hip replaced, but I hope to get back on a bike because there's just no way I could get on one. And I think that is the issue. I think cycling up the Orchard Brae, just you wouldn't be able to do. I agree with you. What was that?
Okay. Gentleman here in the corner. Sorry, Emma, making you... Just trying to get a good spread across the room.
Thanks very much. I lived in the Netherlands in the 1980s, and I have to say that trams were my favourite form of transport in an urban environment. And also, whilst I was there, cars would have to stay behind because they didn't have the priority. I was back in the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago, cycling and walking. I noticed that since I lived there, they've taken active steps to take the car out of the city centres, which are now much more vibrant. Now, the question relates actually to behavioural change. We've said that we need to make a modal shift and we need behavioural change. And I'd like to know to what extent people have thought about using the trams on the on-road option, which I think has got a lot of compelling arguments for it, as one of the strategic elements to help promote that behavioural shift.
Thank you. Really good point about behavioural change that we haven't really touched on yet. Alex, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, it's a very good point. And you mentioned the behaviour change and moving away from private vehicles. And if we do use the on-road route along Orchard Brae, I think we really need to be clear about the transport hierarchy and where we place our priorities. And it should be people walking, people cycling, people taking public transport, the tram, and then private vehicles. So we need to make sure that if we're making compromises on the on-road route, that space and compromises come from private vehicles coming to the city and not at the expense of people walking and cycling.
Adrian.
Well, I just want to add here that having been involved in some health impact assessments before, a group of us, including Public Health Scotland, wrote a document which came out in 2022, so it's pretty recent, about how we use road space reallocation to try to do that, to squeeze down road space, to remove road space for private car use as part of an overall strategy, which is about decarbonisation and all many other aspects of it. So we do have the documentation about the value and the worldwide evidence on road space reallocation and how we can do it.
Thank you, Adrian. Person at the back there in the black and striped top. Thank you.
Thank you. I was interested in the consultation. I understand that it's been delayed. I wondered who is helping the council design the consultation and how you're going to engage, especially the people in North Edinburgh and the other people that are meant to be benefiting so much from it, and whether, how are you going to get their voices heard about what they actually want in their area?
Yeah, again, another really good point about inclusive engagement and how are all voices going to be heard. No, and again, I stress, no one from the council is here to answer that, but comments from the panel, Ewan?
Yeah, I think it's really important that the council properly engage people in North Edinburgh around the consultation. I think Wesley's already talked about some of the documents that were prepared for the council meeting at the start of February. There was some problematic language in there, as Leslie's just already mentioned, but also some of the way the cases were presented, some of the documentation that was going to be presented as part of the consultation, I don't think was really fit for purpose. So it's absolutely right. They're taking the time now to make sure they're going to do a proper job, and I would encourage everyone who cares about this issue to respond to that consultation later in the summer.
Thank you, Ewan, and Leslie's going to come in on this one.
I hate to speak on behalf of the council since I've been away 7 years, thank goodness. But I do understand that Scott Arthur, the convener, was out at, for example, Drylow Community Council speaking to people out there, and as I understand it, we were willing to come and speak to people, but obviously it's an election at the moment, and that's why councillors I was asked rather than councillors because of the consultation, but I understand it has been delayed. I think you made a comment about the previous, as I understand, Daisy, who was in charge of this, has now moved on. So there are new people in, so that's an opportunity to speak to the new people as well. But you're absolutely right about the consultation and about engaging people. And I hate to go on about it, but I think folks did think I did quite a good job of the discussion and consultation regarding the West East Link. That's the kind of consultation, sitting down with people, looking at maps, engaging, getting, I hate to say sides, but it was sides then, and getting people together is absolutely crucial. So that's up to the councillors and the officers. But as I understand, there is ongoing discussions with them, organisations like Spokes and other organisations looking at the alternatives and asking for their help and their support as well. But consultation has to be, and it's not just listening to the loudest voice, it's listening to all voices and people who want to be heard.
Yep. Thanks, Leslie. There's a gentleman at the back there with glasses.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One is, what weight will the consultation have in planning terms? And the second is, how was the Orchard Brae option arrived at? And because if the road space was to be reallocated on a Telford Road to get to the back of the Western General, why wasn't another route with Groat Hill and Queensferry Roads included? That's a bit more specific, but the first point I think is, the first question is the most important one. What weight does the consultation have in planning terms?
Okay, who would like to go? Leslie, do you want?
Maybe somebody would answer better than I'm not absolutely sure. All I know is that the Scottish Parliament and the Council agreed line 1B, so the kind of, and the land is protected, etc. Whereas on the other one, I think it would have to go back to the Scottish Parliament, have to go back to the Council for formal approval, which would take longer and longer. Just hang on a minute. I'm getting tired now. And so, yeah, I think. I don't think it does need planning permission. I'm looking at two people over here who may well know better than I do. I don't think it will need planning permission, but it does need permission from the Scottish Parliament and the Council. As I understand that, that's done, and all that's been done in protection of the land on line 1B, but not on Orchard. Does that answer your question? Well, I can't say. It would be up to the individual councillors who are there, and you'll know that it's a minority administration, so I think sometimes you can't tell what the outcome might be, and whereas previously you would know there was a largest party and you would know if they were supporting you would get through. So in some ways it's how can you engage all the political parties, because I would prefer if we could see there was a solution here that all political parties and everyone, not everyone, but the majority of the people agreed that was the way forward.
Yep. And Ewan?
Sorry, so the two routes that are currently going to be put forward by the council, neither of those has a full planning permission, and both would require what's called a Transport and Works Scotland order, which would make them subject to potential objection, public inquiry, etc.
Yes, yeah, and Alex wants to come in as well here.
Directly to your point about with the weight of the consultation, this isn't going to be a statutory consultation or a legal consultation. So the weight is purely that it will be reported back to the council, and the weight will come from people contacting their councillors, and the final decision will be from councillors.
Thank you. Someone who's not asked a question. The gentleman here in the middle.
Thank you. When the Roseburn to Canal link is completed, it'll be possible to cycle from Granton Square all the way to Hermiston and beyond with no road contact except for about 300 metres at the beginning. My understanding is, and this is my question, that the tram is going to go up the West Granton access route. What will happen to the segregated cycle lane that's there at the moment? Does anybody know that? Thank you. That's for Alex.
Alex,
yes.
yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
If I'm remembering West Granton access right, if we're going north, there's a patch of grass that's quite overgrown now to the left. That's the reserved route for the tram. So the cycle and pedestrian route to the right will be kept. So there'll be no change there.
Okay. Can we go
I think
up to the balcony?
Probably just two more questions.
So I'll take one from the balcony and one from the floor. So anyone in the balcony?
Yes. Yes. So,
There you are.
just a quick question. Is there any scope, given that this is very clearly a very difficult nut to crack on all sorts of fronts? I mean, I personally share a lot of the concerns of people here about the ecology and the wildlife and the green amenity of the Roseburn Path, and it would be personally inconvenient not to have that as retained as it is. But I see the difficulties. Is there any scope for a private individual such as myself to do some blue sky thinking here, think out of the box, suggest things that maybe haven't been considered, alternative routes that may not be either of the two currently being focused on. Things like potentially considering a totally new bridge that goes across sort of at Dean Bridge level, goodness knows where, but to cover the gap for cyclists and pedestrians, supposing the tram went along the Dean Bridge. Is there any scope for maybe considering a wider circuit round Edinburgh to link in with the airport path somewhere? I mean, how can we get involved before the consultation if anybody's brainy enough to come up with something brilliant?
This is such a strategically important project for Edinburgh, and it comes at a very significant cost, around 2 billion. And therefore, we've got to get it right. So personally, I think all options should be on the table.
Okay, thank you. So, sorry, you want to come in? Adrian?
So, just to add to what I said earlier about health impact assessments, one other thing is to think about, perhaps in the way you've just described it in that last question, alternatives that might not have been properly considered. So that would be considered in the sense of looking at population health, but it might say, actually, you want to have another route. Now, that may scupper things that Leslie's been talking about in terms of what's happened in the past, but that may be one of the things that comes out of something like a health impact assessment. That's not unknown.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to take one final question then from the floor. Lady here in the yellow.
Could you tell me what the impact would be on properties which would be close to the Roseburn cycle path?
Okay, anyone want to comment on that? Alex?
Do you mind in terms of impact, as in like direct? I think that would come later if the Roseburn Path was chosen. They do what's called develop design, and they go through and the engineers would come through and look at that. But I don't believe there would then be direct impacts to any of the residential properties. It'd be issues perhaps from vibration and things like that that would have to be looked at.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just going to say there is an issue regarding the one when it goes up Telford Road, because I don't know how the heck it's going to get up to Telford Road, because there's houses and gardens that go right onto the path there. And I've asked the question, but I've never had an answer of why it goes up there. And then there is a possibility of then going round Crew Toll, and then you might have to take out the fire station and build a new fire station. So that's why I personally think going up that way. And the question, just to go back to the Western General, it doesn't matter whether you go in the back door or in the front door, depending on where you're going to get a treatment, it depends on if you go in the back door, you could be quicker for what your treatment is if you go in the front door. But the key is, for me, is that link to the Western General for the people who work there, but the people who want to access it as well. And I just think that, yes, it may well have some effect on that route that goes, if the route I'm talking about, where it comes off at Craigleith shopping centre and then goes round and up there. But as far as I know, the rest of the route, it doesn't have an effect. But there is also some issues about Orchard Brae as well, if you read it in the report.
Okay, so I think, is that bringing us, Emma? I'm sorry we couldn't get to that. I know you're desperate for a... You have had a question, though. Okay, watch for very short. Can't hear you.
Okay. Hi again. In regards to net zero in the future, I know that there are going to be extensive projects at the north of Granton, which is fantastic. Regarding like heat networks and other kind of net zero things around that. I don't know if you know that, but that is available. So I'm looking at a map now, and also connecting those old utility lines. Are the utility lines, do they only exist in the Orchard Brae one? Are there utility lines in Roseburn? Because I don't think there is. So would it be better, my question, is to keep on the Orchard Brae line on road rather than off road? Because of the utilities that already exist.
Utilities, okay. Leslie, you want?
That was one of the main issues. I mean, I have to say, I only came in, as I said, when the revised Tram project and going to meetings in Shanwick Place with these businesses, with people in tears of the delays because of utilities, etc. I would never like anybody else to go through that again. And that is my concern about the Orchard Brae, because it would affect Queensferry Street, it would affect Orchard Brae as well, utilities. And one of the things, it was a railway line before it became a cycle path. And there aren't, as I understand it, any utilities, because you wouldn't have utilities on a railway line. And that is, to me, one of the key advantages of that line in terms of disturbance, etc. And my worry is for businesses that are along that line as well.
Okay, thanks, Leslie. Ewan, do you want to come in and follow up? Okay, no, we're okay. I think that brings us then to the final minute that each panelist is going to have, just 1 minute to close, and we'll go in reverse order. So I think Adrian will go with you first. Thank you.
Okay, so my thing is simply that please think about the long-term health impacts, which is population health, who is going to win and who's going to lose. The history of transport policy in the UK has always been that the rich win out and take the big prize, and the poor people lose out, and that includes population health, the health of the population of Edinburgh in this case. So please let this debate include thinking about the long-term health of the population of Edinburgh in a way that's not been considered in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone that came along tonight. It's great that you want to be engaged, and I'll keep it short. When the consultation comes out in summer, please do respond to it. It's so important that you give your voice and it being heard. So often consultations can be really self-selecting with small people responding to it. So please do respond to it and make your voice clear. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Ewan.
Listen, there's obviously some disagreements here, right? But actually, when I reflect on the conversation here, I see a bit of commonality. I see a bit of commonality in terms of what we need to deliver for North Edinburgh, for Edinburgh's big priorities. And all I ask is that as we look to deliver those priorities, we consider all options for this very expensive and very important project. Thanks.
Thank you, Ewan. Leslie.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key issue has been a very interesting discussion and questions, and I know that when I came along, I think, why did I agree to do this? But I think that, you know, if you believe passionately in investment in public transport, you feel passionately about the future of our city, therefore you need to then come along and argue and put your case forward. And some people will not agree with me, some people will, but I think it's been a very good discussion. So thank you all for coming along and making it a good discussion and questions. Remember, the option that is mentioned about the billions is actually for South Edinburgh as well. So actually the consultation is not just about line 1B and also Orchard Brae, it's also about the links out to South Edinburgh as well. So just to make sure that's clear when we're talking about funding. I think the key is consultation, and remember the consultation is also on South Edinburgh, but line 1A and Orchard Brae is a consultation to go out. And I just emphasise that cycling and walking will be on line 1B, and it's up to councillors and you to make sure that's the best quality of cycling and walking we can get on that option. There is obviously green issues, and I agree with that. There's green issues and there's green challenges. But just to finish, to agree, I think it's about working together, engaging with each other to come up with a solution that's investment in public transport, investment in active travel, and ensuring that we try to get rid of the congestion, getting people out of their cars, and a bit like what you said about behavioural change, that people need to change and can't think they can just get in their car, go where they want, go where they park, and that's the solution. We need to change that, or our city is actually doomed, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you.
Well, that brings our meeting to a close. For me, this has been informative, productive, and a cordial conversation. And I would like to thank all of you who have been here for making it so. Unfortunately, a number of people had to be turned away because of the capacity of this building. If you know them, we're sorry that that happened, but there will be a recording up on the YouTube site so that they can follow that. We simply didn't expect, somebody was saying 150, somebody was saying 180 when we were at capacity, so we've got a really good crowd. But of course, the biggest thanks goes to our chair, Joanna, and to our four speakers, Leslie, Ewan, Alex, and Adrian. Please applaud again.
Thank you. Oh, you did really well, incredibly engaged audience, so yeah, very good. I know,